So hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. And we're really excited about officially launching this and encouraging people to apply and getting this thing off the ground. So just wanted to start with just a quick touch point on what is the Food Systems Leadership Network. There may be some folks on the call here who haven't been engaged with some of our programs and projects and such yet. So really what the FSLN is a national peer learning community. And our goal is to connect food systems leaders to strengthen our individual and collective leadership capacity and also foster collaboration across communities, across this good food movement, to accelerate the realization of a food system that really generates good food health opportunity for all. It's been a real fun adventure meeting all of you over this past 18 months since we launched last January. We've tried all different kinds of things to meet these goals around connecting people, strengthening our leadership capacity, and really fostering connections and collaborations across communities through the mentorship program, through the food systems leadership retreats, nonprofit boot camp courses, the online community of practice platform, the coffee chats, the digital meetups, and on and on. We've just really been testing and piloting and trying out a lot of stuff. And over this last year, we've heard some kind of continual kind of undercurrents in the conversations. And those are, and these are amongst many things that we've been hearing and learning, but I think these are the ones that are kind of most poignant to why we arrived at this Gamechangers laboratory. First is that, creating and having intentional spaces and support for doing deep thinking, skill building, and dreaming together as peers and colleagues and friends and allies is really valuable. I mean, we were just hearing that just a few minutes ago from some folks that had joined the call early and just saying how valuable it is to be able to connect with others that are doing this work. I think there's also just this constant undercurrent of frustration with the current funding paradigm. I know many of you were all in this last hustle and bustle to respond to all of the USDA RFPs that came out all at the same time and had like 1 month turnaround to get our proposals in. And it's for short-term projects that it's frustrating because how do we find funding to do the deep collaborative work that is really needed to get at systems change? And it's really hard to find funding for testing new ideas. We always feel like we've got to have the silver bullet and really push it in the RFP or in our proposals, but not being able to sort of be vulnerable in those proposals and say, hey, we've tried some things and these haven't worked and we're frustrated. We need some time to test, to pilot, to develop new ideas. Don't really know many funders who are supporting that kind of work. And finally, I think that there's just a pretty strong sense of urgency that this situation in our communities is really serious, and that a lot of our current strategies aren't really getting at root causes. And so we continue to address symptoms, which is also really important because there's urgent need in community that has to be addressed now. And at the same time, we've got to get at the deeper root causes of inequities and hunger in our communities. And so, I just am inspired by this last quote. If we always do what you always did, you're always going to get what you always got. And so really think it's time to shake things up and to try some new strategies. And so that's really what the Food Systems Leadership's Network's Gamechangers Laboratory is all about. Well, I'm getting my words all kind of jumbled up today. All right. So what is this thing, the Gamechangers Lab? We dreamed this up really, based on those things that we've been hearing from all of you. And what we want to do is pilot out a new approach to catalyzing new ideas, innovations, and collaborations that build food security through community-based food systems. This is a 6-month, 6th-phase creative design journey. We have been working with a lot of just amazing and brilliant people, consulting with many of you to put this together. And we'll be sharing in a few minutes what the design journey itself is going to look like. But at the end of the 6 months, it's going to culminate in a live pitch of your learning and your ideas to the National Good Food Network Conference here in New Orleans, Louisiana in March of 2020. And we've really modeled this whole laboratory after innovation and design labs, incubators, accelerators, social labs. We've been drawing inspiration and models and tools from a lot of different kind of camps of thinking, and especially for social impact. Like there's all these different tools and methodologies that have been pulled together for creating bigger social impact. And what we want to do is kind of create a mashup of those and see if we can draw from the best thinking, the most progressive thinking, to really push ourselves to get creative and come up with some big game-changing ideas in this sector. So in the first year of the Gamechangers Laboratory, we're going to be selecting 3 teams to participate in this initiative. It is a pilot, so we're going to be learning a lot. So we wanted to start with 3 teams because we feel like we can really actually do that. We can take care, or we can manage 3 teams and learn a lot from the process this year. So each of these teams will receive in-person and virtual training and support. And I'll go into that a little bit more in depth in a moment. Each team will also have a dedicated team advisor. We have 3 amazing advisors on board. I'm still in the process of contracting with them, so I'm not quite ready to tell y'all who they are, but they're fabulous, I can promise you that. And also we have a bucket of funds to pull from for tailored technical assistance as it's needed. The teams will also, as I was speaking to a minute ago, really get some new tools and strengthen their skill sets around collaborative project design. And as I mentioned before, also have this platform to present their ideas at NGFN 2020, which we are going to be pulling in a number of funders to be listening to those pitches in the hopes of funding for full implementation of your ideas that come out of this project. Each team will receive $25,000 unrestricted to do what you want to do with the money to support your team through this process. And also we have funds to support travel to and from the in-person events. And really, as we kind of add it all up, it's about $50,000 worth of support that each team will receive through this project. So thinking about the kind of what is the laboratory itself, it's 6 phases that would start in phase 1 with a kickoff and end at NGFN 2020 in March. And the next slide has a timeline, so I'll speak about time when I get to the next slide. So one thing that I just want to note is that while it looks like it's a linear process, I believe that there will be some kind of blurring of the edges between these phases. So just want to note that. But really with kickoff, what we want to do is to create a really strong foundation for the teams to go on this design journey together. So developing team agreements of how you will work together, what are the values that you want to bring into the work together, what are your communications agreements going to be, et cetera. That's something that we hope that we will ask the teams to complete. They'll also be meeting their advisors, and one of the tools that we'll be pulling into this first phase, amongst others, is called an impact gap canvas. It's a really interesting tool that really looks at what are the assets that are already in community, what's already going on, what's been tried, what's the challenge. So really getting a good sense of like, what is the current state, what's going on. I think that's a really important just kind of current state analysis. The second phase is the design retreat. So that will be an in-person 3-day, pretty intensive retreat here in New Orleans, of course, because I love hosting things in New Orleans, where the teams will be doing a lot of visioning together. What is it that we're wanting to try to create? What do we want to see? What is the future that we're trying to create? What is that future that we know is possible? And then also getting much deeper into a systems diagnosis. So what is going on with the system? And then also in that retreat, we'll be doing a design jam. So that's like we really start getting into creativity, ideation, coming up with new ideas, and really stretching our curiosity, our creativity, and coming up with some new ideas and maybe some wacky ideas. In the phase 3, this is when teams will be heading back home to their communities, and really deeply engaging their community in whatever way you see fit. Creative strategies for really vetting ideas, creating more ideas with community, and also prototyping. So that's coming up with rapid ideas and getting feedback on them, iterating, changing, growing, evolving the ideas, and doing some experimentation. So we have, I'm speaking kind of broadly here, but we have some tools and support systems that we'll be pulling in on each of these phases to really support teams as they do this work. And again, with the advisors providing support throughout each of the phases to really help you move along. In the 4th phase, we'll really start kind of getting down to what is that strategy that we really want to hone in, like what is the one approach that we think is going to have the most impact and that we really want to pursue further. And then really getting a little bit more specific about what is that strategy. So using some of the tools like the Lean Canvas business tool, and also really figuring out, what kind of resources are we going to need to make this idea happen. Phase 5 is going to be getting ready for the pitch at NGFN. So it's really refining that strategy and doing some practice pitches, both with the other teams that are within the laboratory, and then also pulling in the Food Systems Leadership Network to give ideas back to the teams, to ask questions, to really help to refine the strategy. And then finally, the laboratory will kind of culminate at NGFN 2020 in March with a pitch session, and then also an all-team reflection and debrief, and really talking about what next. How are we going to bring these ideas into reality? All throughout this process, we are very intentional about centering racial and social equity. And so it's really at every single one of these phases where we'll be asking ourselves questions and asking one another questions and challenging one another to really remain accountable to how these ideas may have impact, and analyzing our own intentions around this work with a real clear racial and social equity frame. And finally, there's a spirit of curiosity, learning, reflection, and adaptation that we are going to be embracing throughout this process, and that we're also asking the teams to really embrace, recognizing that this is a pilot, that it's an experiment, and that we're really trying to learn together and to push our thinking and get much more creative in collaboration with one another. So to speak to timeline, the first phase will kick off in September. So the program officially will begin September 9th and culminate at the NGFN conference, March 10th to the 13th. There is the in-person retreat that I referred to in phase 2 will be here in New Orleans, October 14th to the 18th. So it's important as teams, get formed and you think about your capacity and interest in participating and applying to participate in this program, that you know that you'd be available during that week, because that's a really important one for all of the team members to be able to participate in. In those months in between the two, kind of in a way sort of end caps here in New Orleans, that's really where the individual teams will be working in community. And in your own places. So there's the work that I was just referring to in each of the phases in the previous slide would be happening during that time. All throughout the phases, the teams will have bi-monthly calls with their advisors to really help them stay on track, to answer any questions, and really just kind of be able to troubleshoot and challenge ourselves to think big during those calls. So that's twice monthly that the teams will be meeting with their advisors. And finally, in terms of the grant deliver, or the grant tranches or disbursements, will be in 3 deliveries of funding. So it would be there at the beginning of the project, halfway through, and at the end. And that was one of the learnings that we received from some of the other social labs and innovation labs that we learned was a best practice in terms of really keeping people engaged throughout the whole process. Okay, I think that's everything on the phases and timeline. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the teams. So we have a pretty extensive list of, kind of guidance for teams on the Gamechangers webpage in the Food Systems Leadership Network's online community of practice. But really what we wanted to really emphasize here is that, you can have a minimum of 3 people, a maximum of 5. And it's important that the team members are in relationship with one another already. This shouldn't be the first time that you've ever worked with this team. It's going to be pretty intense. It's going to require a lot of work, and we want to make sure that there's already some kind of a little bit of a track record of, yeah, we know each other, we can work together, we share values, we share similar approaches in the sense that around work style, being able to really work together well. The team members, I know we've had some questions about this. You don't have to be from one organization. You can be from multiple organizations. You could be located in different places. We are emphasizing that you define what community means to you. So if your community team is in a place, is place-based, then that's your community. You tell us what that means to you. If your community is network leaders in the Southeast that are all working on similar issues, that's your community. You have a shared purpose and a shared identity. So tell us what it is that the community that your team is representing. I think it's really important too, as you think about putting your teams together, is that, making sure that the folks that are coming to the table really have learning and growth mindsets and are open to being challenged, to being really creative, and to collaborating in this project. And finally, it's also important that each of the teams has a lead organization that can be our point in terms of being able to receive the funding and also just point person for communications. Our expectations of these teams, I think I've kind of been maybe hammering on this throughout, but is really active participation throughout the whole process, and really being our co-developers and thought partners throughout this. It's, again, a pilot initiative, and we're going to be learning a lot. And so, we're going to have a couple of just key questions. What are you learning, and what are you getting out of it? What are you going to do with that learning? And then also, what do you need? What other support do you need? Either more or different kinds of tools and support for this laboratory to be really effective. So, we are looking for thought partners and really co-developers in this first year of the laboratory. There is the expectation for attendance at that in-person retreat in October, and also for the virtual calls. For the conference at the end, if it doesn't work for everyone to attend, I think we'll be able to kind of work with that. But definitely each team has to have at least one representative that would come to the conference to pitch your idea at the end of the phases. And again, just that spirit of flexibility, proactivity, and thought partnership with us and our advisors. And I think with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Andrew. Yeah.
All right, thanks. So I'm gonna give some just information and more perspective on the application process. And since it's a new program, we also decided to have a new application process that should be fun. We'll see how it goes. So the applications are open now, and will go open through midnight on July 29th. So you have, about a month from now to work on those. The review process will be initial screening by the Wallace Center staff, so Susan, Annalena, and I. Then we're also putting out a call for peer reviewers from the FSLN network. So each peer reviewer will get a number of applications to review and give input back to us on, and then the Gamechanger advisors will be a final review in that process to select applicants to interview. So the next step would be interviews the week of August 5th with Wellness Center staff and advisors to meet the teams and ask follow-up questions to the application. And then teams will be announced on August 15th. And this is all the website link I put in earlier has the more information on the application and these dates as well, if you want to reference. But if you go to the next slide. So the new part for us and maybe for some of you is the video. So you will be applying with your team through up to a 10-minute video where you would introduce yourself and your team, talk about your community, and speak to what you've learned from past activities, not necessarily a list of what you've done, but what have you learned from what you've done, and have you adapted to things, and also why you want to participate, what you think you can do through Gamechangers that you couldn't do otherwise. What can we really enable through Gamechangers, and these doesn't need to be heavily edited or anything. It's really we want decent audio so we can hear what you're saying, but other than that, it's really about just meeting the team. There's also a written application that has more details, names and bios, information about your organization. That's a SurveyMonkey, and then the link. So your video will be uploaded to a video sharing site, and you can share the link there. And there's ways to do that privately. We can help you with that, but that's the easiest way for us to review, and then also have the advisors and FSLN members to review a video. So if you go to the next slide. All right, so some tips on the link that I sent to the Gamechangers page. There's 9 criteria that us and the peer reviewers and advisors will be looking at, and those are questions they'll be asking as they watch the video. So that's something you could look at and make sure you're addressing that in some form in the video. Also, there's 4 or 5, can't remember exactly now, application questions. So make sure you answer those. There's a main question and then some prompts below as examples of what you can do. You don't have to answer each itemized one, but you want to address the major questions. Make sure all the team members are represented in the video and have a stake and have a part in the application. And demonstrate your team's your working dynamic and ability to work together. So that's why the video hopefully can show that. You can showcase your team's excellence there. Make sure, but since it is, the video, you might want to rehearse, you might want to definitely want to get with your team and think about how you're going to present yourselves in the video and answer the questions. Again, it doesn't need to be fancy editing. Really, we need good audio so we can hear and see the team. It can be a cell phone video. If you're in different locations, you can shoot that and splice it together. Whatever you need to do, but that's the main thing that we'll be reviewing is the 10-minute video for your application. And then I think that's all I had on the application. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, hopefully that gives you guys a little bit of better understanding about what the Gamechangers Laboratory is and the application process. We've had a lot of questions come through previously through the SurveyMonkey questions, and then just now online, so we'll try and get to as many of those as we can in the next 20 minutes. But Susan, I think, was going to talk a little bit about the first 3 here that we have, and then we'll gather the ones that you guys have been throwing out as well.
Sure. So these were a couple of the questions that had come through in the SurveyMonkey and ones that we had gotten through emails and such. So I just wanted to make sure and address these because it feels like it's a common question and probably a gap that we should have had on the website. So apologies. Again, we are learning as we do this. So every input and question that you have is really helpful to us to really think through all the little details. So in terms of, restrictions on the use of funds, as I said earlier, no, there are not restrictions on the funds. And it is up to the teams to determine how to use this, maybe to support staff time, to conduct a community event, to pay the electricity bill. I mean, whatever it is that really needs to happen with that funding is up to you. Secondly, and I think this might have also come through the chat box, if team members can be from different communities and organizations, and yes, you do not have to be from one organization. You do not have to be from one place-based community. There does need to be a shared identity, shared purpose If you are working across communities, so for example, if there are national organizations that are thinking about applying, just help us to understand how it is that you are in community and what community that you're serving. Go ahead,
So
Anna.
just before you jump to the third one, because there's also been a few questions coming in as, do we need to, or must our team be from different organizations, or can we all be part of one? So maybe you want to address that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're from one organization, that's fine. Just make the case for why you're a team and how it is that you have diverse perspectives and lived experiences within that team. That would be really important to get across in your video if you are from one organization. The last bullet there is asking about 501c3 tax status. So the organization that is the lead will need to have 501c3 nonprofit corporation in order to be able to receive the grant from the Wallace Center. But the other team members, maybe community members, teachers, farmers, business owners, etc. So you do not everyone in the team has to be from a 501c3.
There was a question in the chat about that. It can also be if you're fiscally sponsored by a 501c3, that would count as well.
That would be fine too. Yeah, thanks, Andrew.
And related to that lead team question as well, there was a question that came through about would it be okay to have one person be the financial point, or one organization be the financial point and another be the communications point?
I think so. I think we'd be able to work that out. If they, just let us know. I believe that there's a question in the application that says, is there anything else you'd like us to know? Or a question you wish we had asked that we didn't? So add those kinds of things there. If there's important details about your team or any challenges that you face around, fiscal management or whatever, just let us know there.
There was another question that just came through that was related to the allocation of funds. Do you want to see a perspective allocation of how the funds will be used?
I mean, I'm going to be honest. There's some of these things we haven't completely thought through. My first hit on that is no, but that you want to have a conversation with your team and include that in your team agreements about how do we want to use these funds, and that would then be integrated into your team agreements. Andrew and Annalena, if y'all have other thoughts on that piece or answers to any of these questions, please chime in. That's my first hit on that, because otherwise it's that's a lot of like micromanaging on our part to get involved in what you're going to do with the funding. I think it's important that the teams have a shared agreement about how the funding is used.
Yeah, and we are, to that point as well, we are working up with a memorandum of understanding and some team agreements, and that's definitely something that we can expand upon in those too.
Right, a template that teams can use to really think through all those different details of kind of arriving upon agreements within the team.
Mm-hmm. One question, just to shift gears a little bit and get into the design innovation fun ideas part of this, that we've had a few questions around is, should this idea be a wholly new project, or should it be a wholly new project idea as opposed to an innovative project that's currently being worked on?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, because it's something that I think that we've kind of circled around a lot. I think in the initial spirit of this project, it was, rather than coming with what you already have dreamed up, coming with your challenge or your frustration and your desire to come up with a new strategy. There's a distinction there. Rather than coming with what you already think is the strategy, because much of what we're going to be doing is uncovering what's really going on here and creating a host of new ideas about what are other ways that we could get at this issue. And my concern is, if you come in with your preset idea or project that you're already working on, that it may be harder to kind of get into that frame of thinking and to let go of some of the ideas that we're already wed to in order to really go into a creative design space. So, I mean, I would not discourage you from bringing an idea that's in the making already, but that's just something I would invite you to think about. Andrew and Annalena, do y'all have anything that you would add to that? I know that's a little bit vague, but hopefully helpful.
I think just part of it too is that spirit of curiosity and being able to shift and maybe let go of some ideas and embrace new ones as well. So I think, yeah, it's like an either or, yes, and both and kind of situation, but keeping with that spirit. Let's see, Andrew, have you seen any hands being raised? I don't want to miss anyone over there.
I do see that question from Carrie that's similar, as how established should our idea be? Again, if you look at the questions in the video application, you'll see that what we're trying to get at is what's going on in your community? What have y'all been trying, and what's working and what's not? And why is it that you want to participate in this design journey? So it doesn't really ask you about what your idea is. There's not a question in that application that's asking you specifically about your idea. So that's not what we're expecting you to come with at all. I would encourage more on the side of where you're frustrated, where you're not making progress, and especially in collaboration with others that you're working with to try and really make an impact around food security. Where has the kind of the barrier been? What's the blockage? Tell us about that.
And I suppose that this might lead well into another question that we've had that comes about talk about expectations a little bit, and what is the time commitment or anticipated workload for teams that are participating in this? So through the design, testing, that all 6 phases, if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, we don't know yet because we haven't done it just yet, but as I look at the scoping and kind of what I think the level of effort will be for each team, it looks to me like it's going to be about 5 hours a week. If it was really like committed and doing, like really diving in, and that's like with your teams and in the calls with your advisors, et cetera. I would say kind of across the 6 phases. There are, the in-person retreats, which will be more time than that, obviously, because those are like, 3 full days in New Orleans in October. And I think that it also kind of will depend, like during the holidays, like we've been accounting for that there'll be time off, everybody's going to be traveling, et cetera. So we've really thought that through in terms of what the teams would be doing, in November, December, and into January. So it's really more of, where you're doing a lot more of the community engagement and really working together as a team to select your strategy and start really kind of thinking through some of the particulars around resource scoping, et cetera. So I would anticipate about 5 hours a week on average across the course of the project. It may be less than that at times, and it may be a little bit more at times.
Thank you. And there was a hand raised by Sean. I'm going to go ahead and I think you can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask your question. Or I can.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. So I'm wondering, can applicants participate in more than one team in an application? So, for example, if there was someone who was thinking about participating in a local project, could we then ask them to participate in a national project? Does that make sense?
Sure, like to be a team member in multiple teams that are putting in a proposal?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. I think that in the end, though, we would only be able to, you'd only be able to participate in one team, right?
Yeah,
So
I figured as much, yeah.
Participate in 2. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here's another question coming in from Milele, and apologies if I did not get your name pronounced it correctly.
You said it right.
Okay,
Hi,
good,
Milele.
beautiful. How big of an impact should our project have? What is the scope and reach? Great question. Lots of good questions coming in.
I know, y'all are keeping us on our toes today. So, I mean, I think that's up to you, Malele. I think it's up to you and what you determine. Like, what is the thing that when you're thinking about this opportunity, what is really striking you is like, this is what we should be talking about. What is that thing? Bring it. I don't think we're wed to anything. I think what is really important here is that, you know, whatever the strategy is, that the issue that you want to dig into, that you're really willing to share that with others. This will be in community and collaboration with others, right? So, I mean, there's going to be the pitch at the end to the community. There's going to be some points where we'll pull in and invite the larger network to give feedback. And there'll be also the working with the other teams. So, you know, I would say, you know, something that's maybe like an internal organizational challenge would probably not be the best fit for this iteration of the lab. Whereas something that is a community topic, that's an issue that y'all are wrestling with, that already is something that you're talking about, you're working on, and if it's a place-based community, that's fine. Just let us know, you know, what it is. I think again, you know, I'm going to put a lot of these back on y'all. Like, it's up to you to determine, and just follow the guidance in terms of the questions that we've asked for the video application and supporting written application. And I just want to emphasize too, on that written application, it's really short. There's not a lot. It's just asking for your team members' names, their bios, and also, you know, just like a overarching kind of summary of why it is that your team wants to participate in the lab.
Excuse me, we had a question come in talking about the size of the teams. So there are two questions that are quite related. Could you imagine a team having more than 5 members is the first half, or members and an advisory members? And then the related, I'll ask the related question after as a follow-up.
I would say that in terms of, you know, participation in the lab, to be able to use the resources that we have, 5 would be max, and especially for being able to attend the calls and the in-person training. But if your team decided to have an advisory team, a larger group or circle that's involved with this, absolutely. And let us know that that's your intention in the video. I think that would actually be really smart. It would probably add another layer of planning and complexity to planning for your team. Especially if your team is already comprised of folks that are from different organizations. So like scheduling and work planning together, like finding the time to work together might be tricky. But I think that, you know, that's a great idea. We would not discourage it.
And there's also on that, there's a lot of community engagement built into the process. So think about if someone should be on the team versus if they're an advisor, maybe they could be engaged through that end of it versus being on the team for the whole ride.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great distinction. What was related to that was, you know, who pays for travel to the first training? And if you have 3 members or 5 members, or what are the restrictions around that?
We have funding to support travel that is separate from the $25,000 grant. So we will support the team members, whether it's 3, 4, or 5 team members, to get to and from the retreat. And we'll cover the accommodations of the retreat as well. So food and hotel expenses. Well, actually, retreat center. We like to do these things in residential retreats, because otherwise we're doing too much hustling of people around, too much like body shepherding around town.
And then, yep, just getting to this one from Andrew and Gabby. If we are established as an LLC but have a mission completely dedicated to addressing food security and eradicating food deserts, are we qualified to apply?
We would need to talk with you. I think my concern is that it's a grant mechanism that we're using, and it's from the funding source is an individual donor. whose intentions were about supporting community-based efforts at getting at food insecurity. So I think we would just need to kind of examine it. So I won't discourage you from applying, but I would encourage you to try to find a nonprofit partner who could be a part of your team.
Let's see here. We have a few more minutes, so if you have more questions, please do send them through. Well, okay, here's a related one. Would a government agency count as a lead organization? It's tricky, all those different.
I know. I feel like I can't quite answer the question until we talk to our contracts unit about what kinds of entities we can provide grants to. So we might have to circle back to you on that about the government question.
Yep, and that's a good point, just as a reminder too, that even we'll handwrite answers out to all of these questions, as well as the ones that we didn't get to, and post those up on the webpage and distribute them as well. So you'll still have those especially for questions like that we'll have to loop back around to. One more, well, I guess we have about 1 minute left, so I'll leave with this end question here. How important will the history of the applicant agency be? It's a little bit of a tricky question there.
I'm assuming that that's referring to like a track history or track record of having already done work in the community or on this issue. I do think that it's important that, you know, especially considering that it's a national initiative and there's going to be a lot of teams that have a lot of experience, that's who this network is, or folks that are doing, you know, food systems leadership across the country and food systems development. So I think that, you know, it's going to be pretty competitive in that sense. So in the sense of, you know, folks that have a track record of working in this space. So I would encourage you to find people in your team who have maybe more of a track record working in community, working on this issue. And, you know, maybe if a fresh new perspective is also what's needed, then make the case for that in your video application.
All right, so sounds like make the case in the video application. All right, well, Susan, do you want to close us out?
Sure. I just want to say thank you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today and for your interest in this. And we're really excited, hoping that, you know, this can be done again in future rounds for different purposes and with different uses. So we're really excited about just creating a kind of an action think tank for the food systems community. So we hope that you'll be joining us in this process, and we look forward to seeing your applications. And please do not hesitate to reach out to us with your questions. So we've got, you know, the email on the website, but also, you know, reach out to us directly and let us know what you're thinking. If you want some feedback on what you're thinking, we really will be open to working with you on that. So with that, thanks, Sandra and Annalena, for co-hosting today. And thanks, everybody, for being here. I hope you have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.